Our people say that a mother is not just a person, she is a miracle wrapped in a wrapper. You see, when a woman enters the spirit world with the hunger of her children on her mind, the heavens must give her a way to provide. They say that the spoon of a ghost does not lack soup, and the fire of a mother's spirit can cook a meal, even without firewood. As the second morning broke, Adanna looked at the empty hearth in her kitchen. She saw Kechi looking at the empty pot with tears in her eyes, and she saw little Obinna chewing on his finger, because the stomach has no understanding of death. The elders say that the love of a mother is the greatest juju in the world. Adanna stood in the center of the kitchen and closed her eyes. She reached out her hands into the empty air, calling upon the strength of her ancestors and the love she bore for her husband's children. "I am Adanna," she whispered, her voice vibrating like a gong. "I did not come back to watch my seeds wither. If I cannot buy from the market of the living, let the market of the spirits open for me. Listen to me carefully." A strange thing began to happen. A cold, sparkling mist began to fill the small kitchen. Suddenly, the empty sack of rice in the corner began to swell, as if invisible hands were filling it with the finest grains. The empty bottle of oil on the shelf began to overflow with gold, and the smell of fresh fish, fresh from the celestial rivers, began to waft through the house. Kechi rubbed her eyes in wonder. "Mommy, look. I thought we were out of food, but the bags are full. And the fire, look at the fire." The wood in the stove had caught flame on its own, burning with a bright, blue light that gave off no smoke. Adanna smiled, her face glowing with a heavenly light. She took the wooden spoon, and though her hands were mist, the spoon obeyed her. She began to cook a meal that smelled like paradise. But you see, there is a mystery to the food of the spirits. To Kechi and Obinna, the food was delicious and filling, giving them strength like they had never known. But to the neighbors passing by outside, the house looked silent and dark. They could not smell the fish, they could not see the blue flame. To the world, the house of Adanna was a house of mourning, but inside, Adanna was creating a sanctuary of light. "Eat, my children," Adanna said, placing bowls of steaming rice before them. "As long as I am here, you will never know the taste of want." But even as she watched them eat, the voices of the ancestors grew heavy. For you see, every time Adanna used her magic to provide, her own form became a little thinner. She was trading her spiritual energy for their physical survival. She was pouring her own soul into their bowls. Every grain of rice they swallowed was a piece of her soul disappearing. She was fading away, just so her children could grow. She was dying a second time, just to hear the sound of them chewing. Outside the compound, the world was moving. A group of villagers, led by the news from the highway, was walking toward the house. They were coming to tell the orphans that their mother was dead. They were coming with long faces and fake tears. But they would find a door that was locked from the inside by a power they could not understand. They would knock and hear the laughter of children, and it would strike fear into their hearts. The elders say that the person who tries to enter a house protected by a mother's ghost is like a man trying to catch the wind with a net. Day 2 was at its peak, and while the children were full and happy, the battle for their future was just beginning at the front gate. Our people say that the vulture does not fly to a house unless it smells the scent of a fallen tree. You see, the news of tragedy travels faster than a harmattan fire. By the morning of the third day, the whispers from the highway had reached the ears of those who were supposed to be the family of Adanna. But listen to me carefully, it is a sad thing when a man's brothers are more interested in his property than in his orphans. Leading a small crowd was Uncle Jude, the brother-in-law of Adanna. He was a man whose heart was as dry as a coconut shell. He did not come with bread for the children, he came with a heavy iron padlock in his pocket, ready to seal the door and claim the land. "Move out of the way," Jude shouted to the neighbors gathered at the gate. "The woman is dead." The children must be taken to the village square, so we can decide what to do. A woman's house belongs to the kinsman. But as Jude stepped into the compound, the air suddenly turned thick. The sun was shining on the street, but inside the yard of Adanna, it was as if the atmosphere had become a wall of invisible thorns. The elders say that the person who tries to rob an orphan while the mother's spirit is still warm is inviting a disaster that will follow his name. Jude reached for the door handle, but the metal burned his hand like a hot coal. He screamed and jumped back, his eyes bulging with terror. "What is this?" Jude cried, shaking his burnt palm. "The door is hot. There is a strange fire in this house." Inside, the children were confused. They heard the shouting outside, but to them, the house felt peaceful. Kechi moved toward the window, but Adanna placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, her touch feeling like a cool breeze. "Do not look out there, my daughter," Adanna whispered, her voice vibrating like a distant bell. "It is only the village people talking loudly.
Do not leave this room.
Stay here and play with your brother." Outside, the crowd was panicking. Every time they tried to force the gate, the sound of 1,000 bees swarming would fill their ears. The ground began to tremble under Jude's feet, and the very dust rose up to blind him. "The woman has not even been buried, but her house is fighting us," a neighbor screamed. They all turned and ran, tripping over their own feet to escape the invisible power of a mother's ghost. But Jude stood at the edge of the road, his face twisted with a bitter hunger. "I will return," he hissed. "You cannot lock this door forever. When the hunger bites those children, they will come out, and I will be waiting." The battle for the morning was won, but the heart of Adanna was sinking like a stone in a well. She leaned against the door, and for the first time, she saw her own reflection in a bowl of water. She was fading. Her form was becoming like a thin mist. The magic she used to provide food, and the strength she used to hold the door, were draining her spirit. She looked at the children laughing in the corner, and a cold terror gripped her. She was a ghost who could only protect them, as long as she had the strength to manifest. "If I stay here," she whispered to the empty air, "I will simply vanish, and Jude will come back to find them alone. I am a voice that no one hears. I am a hand that no one sees." She looked at the gate. The world outside was loud and busy, yet she was a prisoner in her own home. She knew she had to find a way to reach the living. She had to find a way to tell the village the truth before the sun set on the seventh day. But how does a shadow speak to the sun? How does a silent spirit find a witness in a world that has already forgotten her name? She stood at the threshold, looking into the street, her heart crying out for a miracle she could not yet see. The elders say that the path of a ghost is a lonely one, where you walk among many, but are seen by none. You see, the world of the living is like a busy marketplace. Everyone is shouting, and no one has the time to listen to the whisper of the wind. Adanna had protected her home for 3 days, but she knew that her strength was a candle burning at both ends. A mother's love is a restless spirit. It cannot sit still while the future of her children hangs by a thread. She stepped out into the village street, her feet making no sound on the dry sand. She was a shadow moving through the world of the living. She saw her neighbors, people she had shared salt and laughter with, sitting outside their houses, roasting corn and talking about the day's trade. She ran to them, her hands reaching out in a desperate plea that no one could see. "Please," she cried, but her voice was only a sigh in the trees. "My children are in that house. My husband's brother wants to devour their destiny. Someone, please, go to them. But listen to me carefully, the world is deaf to the frequencies of the grave." A man brushed past her, and he only shivered, pulling his cloth tighter around his shoulders. "The night air is strange today," he muttered to his friend, never knowing he had just walked through the broken heart of a mother's ghost. Adanna felt a terror she had never known. She ran to the house of the village chief, pounding on the heavy wooden gates with all her might. She screamed until her spirit felt like it was tearing apart, but the guards only looked at the swaying branches and complained about the coming rain. To them, she was nothing but a cold breeze. She was a queen in her own home, but on the street, she was a prisoner of silence. She sat by the roadside, her translucent head bowed in her hands. The weight of the fourth day was pressing down on her. Time was a river flowing away, and she was drowning in the middle of her own people. Is there no one, she whispered to the dust? Is there no soul in this village, whose heart is open to the unseen? She began to walk again, wandering aimlessly toward the outskirts of the village, where the bushes grow thick and the old paths are forgotten. She was lost in her own sorrow, her form flickering, like a lamp running out of oil. But as she passed a small, crumbling hut made of red mud and ancient thatch, she stopped. The air here felt different. It didn't feel cold and deaf, it felt warm and heavy, with the scent of burning herbs and wood smoke. An old woman was sitting by a small, flickering fire outside the hut. She was as wrinkled as a dried plum, and her eyes were covered by a thick white film, the eyes of a woman who had been blind for many years. But as Adanna approached, the old woman did not shiver. She did not look away. Slowly, the old woman turned her head, following the movement of the ghost with perfect precision. She blew into the fire, and the flames leaped up, casting a long, dark shadow behind Adanna. You are walking very loudly, for someone who has no feet on the ground, the old woman said, her voice cracking like dry parchment in the wind. Adanna froze. Her heart, the little piece of it that still beat in the spirit world, hit her chest. She looked left and right, but the street was empty. Are you speaking to me? Adanna whispered, her voice trembling with a hope she was afraid to hold. The old woman poked the fire with a stick and smiled, showing toothless gums that held the wisdom of a century. The living are too busy looking at the sun to see the moon, my daughter. But I have lived in the dark for many years, and in the dark, the spirits shine like stars. Why are you not resting with your husband? Why are you wandering the streets with the scent of the highway, and the dust of a tragedy, still on your wrapper? The elders say, that the eye that is close to the world, is the eye that sees the truth. For the first time since the accident, Adanna was not alone. She fell to her knees before the blind woman, her spirit shaking, as she realized she had found a bridge. But the mystery was only deepening. For while one person could see her, the rest of the village was still sharpening their greed for her children. And the fifth day was already knocking at the door. Our people say that a person who is drowning does not ask the fisherman for his name, they only reach for the net. Adanna looked into the milky, sightless eyes of the old woman and felt, for the first time, that the heavy stone on her chest was being lifted. You see, the world is full of people who have eyes but see nothing, yet here was a woman who had no sight, but saw everything. Grandmother, Adanna, wept, her voice sounding like the whistle of a distant bird. You see me. You truly see me. The old woman, known to the village as Mama Agba, nodded slowly. I see the love that is keeping you from the light, daughter. I see the red dust of the road on your spirit, and I see the two small hearts that are tied to yours by a golden cord. But your light is flickering. You are pouring your soul into a cup that has a hole in the bottom. Why have you stayed behind the veil? Adanna told her everything. She told her about the choice at the crossroads, the magic food she was cooking to keep Obina and Kechi from crying, and the spirit wall she had built to keep the vultures away. But most of all, she told her about Uncle Jude, and the padlock in his pocket. The 7th day is coming, Grandmother, Adanna cried. When I vanish, who will tell the village that my children are not alone? Who will stop the man who wants to steal the roof from over their heads? I am a ghost, and the living only listen to the living. Mama Agba stayed silent for a long time, the smoke from the fire swirling around her head like a crown of grey hair. The elders say that wisdom is a slow-moving river, but it eventually reaches the sea. Mama Agba reached out her hand, a hand that looked like the roots of an ancient tree, and felt the cold air where the hand of Adanna should be. A ghost can protect a house, the old woman whispered, but only a witness can protect a destiny. You have used your strength to feed their stomachs, but you must use the remaining days to feed the truth to the village. Jude is a man who fears what he cannot see, but he respects what the elders decree. Mama Agba stood up, her bones creaking like a heavy door. Go back to your children, Adanna. Keep them safe for the 5th night. Tomorrow, when the sun is at its highest, I will come to your gate. I will be the voice for the woman who has no breath. We will call the village elders, and we will show them that even in death, a mother's eye is still watching her compound. But then, the old woman's face grew grave. But remember this, daughter, the more you speak through me, the faster your time will fade. By the 7th day, you will be nothing but a memory. Are you ready to disappear completely, so that they can stay? Adanna looked back toward her home, where her children were sleeping, and a smile of pure peace crossed her ghostly face. Grandmother, I was ready to die for them on the road. I am ready to vanish for them now. As Adanna flew back to her house, the 5th day began to break. The sky turned a bruised purple, and the birds began to sing a song that sounded like a warning. Jude was already awake, sharpening his grid and talking to men who had no conscience. He did not know that a blind woman and a ghost were preparing a table of justice that he would never be able to sit at. The elders say that the sun can try to hide the moon, but it can never stop the moon from shining when its time has come. You see, greed is a loud drum, but truth is a silent mountain. Uncle Jude stood before the gate, his chest puffed out like a toad. He thought that because Adanna was dead and the children were small, the house was a fruit ripe for the plucking. People of our village, Jude shouted, waving the crowbar. We cannot allow children to live in a haunted house. The mother is gone, and the spirits have taken over. As the head of the family, I am breaking this door today, to claim what belongs to the kinsmen. But just as he raised the iron bar to strike the wood, a silence fell over the crowd. It was a silence so heavy, that even the birds stopped chirping. Our people say, that when a blind woman tells you she can see a ghost, you do not argue, you listen. Mama Agba stopped exactly 1 inch from Uncle Jude. She did not look at him, she looked through him. Jude, she said, her voice sounding like the crack of a whip. The iron in your hand is heavy, but the guilt in your heart is heavier. You want to break a door that is being held by the hands of a queen. Jude laughed, though his knees were shaking. Old woman, go back to your herbs. Adanna is lying in a cold room at the mortuary. There is no one in this house but 2 crying orphans. Is that so? Mama Agba whispered. She turned to the crowd. Elders of our land, you say you see an empty house. But I see a mother sitting on her stool. I see a woman who has refused to leave her children because she knows the wolves are at the gate. Adanna, speak so that the deaf may hear. Listen to me carefully, a miracle is not always a flash of light, sometimes, it is a sound. Suddenly, a wind blew from inside the house, a wind that smelled of fresh ginger, and the soap Adanna used to wash her children's clothes. Jude. The voice did not come from the old woman. It came from the very walls of the house. It was the voice of Adanna echoing with the power of the thunder. The crowbar fell from Jude's hand, clattering on the stones. The villagers fell to their knees, covering their ears. My children are not orphans, as long as I have breath in the spirit world, the voice roared. Touch this gate, and the earth will swallow your name. Mama Agba stood tall, her white eyes glowing. The mother has spoken. She has 7 days to settle her house, and the heavens have granted it. If any man enters this compound before the moon sets on the 7th day, he will answer to the ancestors. Jude scrambled backward, his face turning the color of ash. He turned and ran, his followers dropping their tools as they fled. The villagers watched in awe as the gate, which had been locked, slowly creaked open on its own, but no one was standing there. The 5th day was at its peak. The enemy had been scattered, but at a great cost. Inside the house, Adanna collapsed onto the floor. Her legs were gone, she was now only a floating mist from the waist up. She had used almost everything to find her voice. Kechi and Obina ran to her, feeling the cold air. They didn't understand the battle, but they saw that their mother was fading. "Mommy, you are disappearing," Kechi wept, trying to grab her mother's hand, but her fingers passed right through. Adanna looked at her children with a love that was deeper than the ocean. She had 2 days left. 2 days to finish the work. 2 days to ensure that when she finally vanished, the village would never let Jude return. The elders say that the candle burns brightest just before it is swallowed by the dark. You see, the 6th day arrived with a silence that was heavier than a funeral shroud. Adanna was no longer the woman who walked the market with a spring in her step. She was now a flickering light, a soft glow that could barely hold the weight of a wooden spoon. Inside the house, the atmosphere was thick with a peace that surpassed human understanding. Adanna knew that the grains of sand in her hourglass were few. She did not spend this day fighting uncles or screaming at the wind. No. She spent it sitting on the mat with Kechi and Obina, teaching them the lessons that must last a lifetime. "Kechi, my brave daughter," Adanna whispered, her voice like the rustle of silk. "When the sun rises tomorrow, and you do not see my shadow on the wall, do not look for me in the grave. Look for me in the way you care for your brother. Look for me in the fire you light to cook his food." A mother's love does not leave the house, it only changes its form. Our people say that a child's heart is the only place where a parent can live forever. Obina, with the innocence of a 5-year-old, held up the empty pack of pink biscuits. "Mommy, will you go back to the market tomorrow?" he asked, his voice small and sleepy. Adanna felt a spear of light pierce her spirit. She reached out, and using the very last of her spirit magic, she touched the empty pack. Suddenly, the pack was no longer empty. It became full, overflowing with biscuits that tasted of honey and starlight, the last gift from a mother who had nothing left to give but her soul. "Eat, my king," she said. "This is the bread of my heart. It will give you strength when the road is long. But listen to me carefully, outside the house, the village was changing. The elders, led by Mama Agba, had returned. They did not come with padlocks, they came with the king's staff and the village hunters. They sat in a circle around the compound, forming a human wall of protection. They had seen the miracle, and they had felt the fire of the voice of Adanna. Uncle Jude was gone, driven out of the village by the shame of his own greed. The land was sealed by the king's decree, it would belong to Kechi and Obina forever, and any man who tried to touch a single stone of that house would answer to the law of the land and the law of the spirits. The elders say that a mother's work is never truly finished, but her time is not her own. Adanna saw that her children were safe. She saw the elders guarding the gate. She saw that the stolen destiny had been returned. She walked to the door and looked out at the village. She saw Mama Agba sitting by the fire, nodding her head as if to say, "It is well, daughter. You can go now." The 7th day was beginning to bleed into the horizon. The first light of dawn was touching the leaves of the iroko tree. Adanna felt the pull of the great river. She felt the hand of her husband, Emeka, reaching out from the light to take her home. She turned back to the sleeping children. She did not cry this time. Her eyes were full of a glory that the living cannot describe. Do not cry for the mother who vanished, cry for the house that will never again hear the sound of her laughter, only the echo of her prayers in the walls. She fought death for 7 days, and she won, but the price was her presence. She leaned over them, breathing a final blessing into their souls, wisdom for Kechi, and strength for Obina. The 7th day has come, the ancestors whispered. And the shadow that loved too much is finally ready to become the sun. The elders say that the sun does not need to announce its arrival, the light speaks for itself. On the morning of the 7th day, Kechi opened her eyes and looked for the shadow that had kept her warm. She called out, "Mommy," but the only answer was the chirping of the morning birds. But listen to me carefully, there was no fear in the house. Kechi stood up and found her mother's favorite wrapper folded neatly on the stool. Beside it sat the pack of biscuits, still full, and a small pile of golden cowries, a final gift from the spirit world, to ensure they would never beg for bread. She walked to the door and opened it. She saw the village elders, the king's messengers, and the blind Mama Agba sitting in the yard. They all stood up in respect. They were not looking at an orphan, they were looking at the daughter of a warrior. The story of Adanna did not end on the highway. It did not end in the dust. It began a new life in the hearts of those she left behind. You see, a mother is like a grain of corn, she must fall to the earth and vanish, so that a whole forest of hope can grow in her place. My people, we have traveled this journey of love and sacrifice together. We have seen the sweetness of the market and the bitterness of the road. But what have we learned as we sit around this digital fire? The elders say that he who has a mother has a protector that even death is afraid of. Look at your life today. Many of us treat our parents like old furniture that we only notice when it is broken. We wait until the voice is silent before we wish we had listened. We wait until the hands are cold before we wish we had held them. The story of Adanna is a mirror. It asks you, if you were given 7 days to say what was left unsaid, what would you do?
Comply.
This story teaches us that greed is a blind traveler. Uncle Jude looked at a house and saw land and money, but he was too blind to see the love that was guarding the door. Do not be a Jude in your family. Do not wait for tragedy to strike before you show mercy to the widow and the orphan. The earth is a circle. What you sow in the lives of the fatherless, you shall reap in the lives of your own children. To the mothers watching this, you are the pillars that the world does not see. Your prayers are the invisible shields that stop the arrows of the night.
My sweet
Even
babies.
when you feel tired, even when your hands are rough from the market and your pockets are empty, remember, Adanna. Your love is a currency that never loses its value, even in the spirit world. And to the children, honor the one who carried you when you were nothing. Love is the only thing we can take with us when we cross the great river. As we close this chapter of African cinematic tales, we thank you for staying with us through every tear and every miracle. If this story touched your soul, do not keep the blessing to yourself, share it with someone you love. In the comments, write, "Mothers are good," if you believe a mother's love never dies. And tell us, now that the story is over, what will you say to your mother today? We leave you with the wisdom of our fathers. The moon may set, but the stars remain to tell the story of the light. May your house be protected, may your table never be empty, and may the spirit of love always guard your gate. Until we meet again in the circle of stories, stay blessed.